Hello. If you are a married woman, you may often think like this. I wonder if this man lying next to me is really on my side. A man and a woman who were passionately in love, as if they couldn't live without seeing each other even for a single day. But after being married for about 3 years, sometimes find themselves in a worse relationship than strangers. Some say that this is because of the expiration date of love, but I cannot agree with that. If that were true, it would be difficult for any family to survive for more than 3 years. In fact, most married couples last a long time, regardless of any expiration dates. The conflict between a couple is due to individual circumstances, not the expiration date of love, just like what happened with my husband and me. I got married to my husband after 3 years of dating. Before I met my husband, I was a person with a weak personality who couldn't refuse unreasonable requests that I didn't want to do. So during my school days and at work, I was always taken advantage of by people. In short, I had zero self-esteem. I was afraid that people would hate me. So even if I didn't like something, I couldn't say no. I tried not to offend people. Because of that, meeting people always felt like a burden. It was too much for me to relieve stress by chatting with friends or going out on a night out with my peers like others usually do. But I couldn't just live with the stress piling up. So as a last resort to survive, I found scuba diving. When I went to the sea, there was no need to be swayed by anyone, and the silence itself, without any sound, was so comforting. As someone who couldn't swim, learning how to scuba dive was very difficult, but it was still rewarding. At first, I didn't want to hang out with other people, so I took one-on-one lessons. However, as time passed, I began to fall in love with scuba diving, and my interpersonal relationships improved enough for me to go on scuba diving trips to Southeast Asia and other places with members of the club who shared the same hobbies. As I continued to travel with people who were unfamiliar to me at first, I became close enough to keep in touch with them on a personal level. One of the people I became close to is my current husband. My husband worked for a mid-sized company after graduating from college in the city. He was the most talented one among our members, having been a member of the scuba diving club since his college days. As a beginner at the time, I received a lot of help from my husband. As time went by, I became more dependent on my husband. As I thought of him as a trustworthy person, I started to see him as more than just a friend. It was a natural progression for our relationship to develop into a romantic relationship. Throughout our relationship, we went everywhere together tirelessly. Then one day, my husband said, if this continues, let's just get married and live in the same house. Wouldn't it be better since we would also save on utility bills? Are you calling that a proposal now? It was disappointing. I wasn't expecting a fancy proposal, but to ask me to get married to save on bills was too much. So I stopped answering my husband's calls and contacting him for a while. After a month, I got a call from a club member. This time we're going to Bohol to go scuba diving. Would you like to go with us? We all decided to go because there were really cheap airline tickets available. Are you going too? Honestly, I was intrigued. Bohol was a place I always wanted to visit, but I was bothered by my husband, so I asked if my husband was going too. Samuel is busy with work, so this time he said he wouldn't be able to go. Even though I felt fortunate to hear those words, somehow I was also disappointed. The person who always stayed by my side every time I went into the water was no longer by my side. I felt so empty without him. But what could I do? I cut off contact with him because I was upset. Anyway, I got to spend my summer vacation in Bohol with my club members. When we arrived in Bohol and left the airport, a damp energy unique to Southeast Asia enveloped my entire body. We took the chartered bus that came to pick us up and headed straight to the hotel. The other members were ready to jump into the sea at any moment, but for some reason I didn't feel like it because my relationship with my husband had not been resolved yet. Even though I was angry that day and didn't answer the phone and cut off contact, I didn't intend to break up with him, so my heart was heavy the whole time. It was even more so because we had decided before to come to Bohol together. Everyone unpacked and went out to eat, but I had no appetite, so I took a walk on the beach alone. The beach was full of families and couples. Being alone in it was only me, so I thought about my husband even more. If I hadn't been so angry that day, we would have been walking on this beach together by now. But that was when I heard a familiar voice from far away. It was my husband's voice calling me. When I heard the sound, I turned around and saw my husband standing there. He said he was sorry about last time, and this time he said he would propose properly, so could I please give him one more chance? As I watched my husband standing there, sweating profusely and not knowing what to do, I already accepted him in my heart. Because I thought I couldn't do without this man, I ran and threw myself into his arms. Our love fight ended like that. But on that day, my husband proposed to me in front of the club members. I was dying of embarrassment, which left me trembling. But I couldn't show it, even for my husband, who mustered up his courage. So we promised to get married, and soon after, we visited both sides of our parents and received their approval for the marriage. I had a brother who was 7 years older than me, and he was already married, so there was no need to worry about the order of getting married. My husband also had a younger sister who was still in college. It was not the time to worry about our marriage. Besides, we were both at the ripe age for marriage and had stable jobs. Without wasting any time, in the fall of that year, we decided to hold the ceremony right away. However, there was a difference of opinion when it came to housing. Do you want to buy a 3,000 square feet condominium? I asked, where do we have the money for that? My husband replied, are you really going to rely on our parents? I added, I don't want to do that either. But honestly, in times like these, buying a house as soon as possible is the way to make money, my husband explained. The only thing is getting a bank loan. I think it would be a good idea to ask both of our parents to help out with whatever is short, splitting it half and half. What do you think? I suggested. If you want to buy a house, how about a smaller one? Maybe around 2,000 square feet. That way, the two of us can take out a loan and live comfortably, I added. My husband insisted that we should buy a 3,000 square feet unit to make a profit when we sold it later. But realistically, I knew it wasn't something the two of us could handle. So he didn't insist any longer. That's how we bought a condo without our parents' help. It was a home we got with our own efforts, and there was a sense of pride in that. Of course, the joy was short-lived, and I sighed when I saw the bank loan payments come up every month. But we were both working hard to earn money, so I wasn't too worried. I had hopes that one day this house would become our home. Of course, I didn't know what the future held for my husband and me. About 6 months after we got married, my brother lost his job. He was not even 40 years old, but he got laid off. Since he was not that old yet, I thought he would get a job soon. However, my brother made an unexpected decision. Do you want to take the civil service exam? I asked him, did your wife give you permission to do that? I added, yes, she told me to try for just 1 year. If not, I'll get a job again, my brother replied. 1 year is the maximum that we can survive on my wife's earnings alone. So for the next year, I'll be going away to focus on studying intensively. In the meantime, please take care of Mom for me. My brother promised to study for a year like that. He entered an intensive program to prepare for the civil service exam that had a dormitory. I thought my sister-in-law was great. If I were her, I didn't think I could cheer for my husband's being away for a whole year, for him to take on a challenge. So without anyone knowing, I secretly sent money to my sister-in-law every month. Of course, it was not from our living expenses, and it was from my personal account because I couldn't spend living expenses, which included my husband's salary, on my family's affairs without consulting him. To cover that money every month, I worked part-time editing company documents. It didn't affect my work or life, but I had to fully dedicate my weekends. Still, I felt fortunate to be able to help in this way. A year passed like that, and fortunately, my brother passed a grade 7 civil service exam. He started working again. The salary was less than that of his previous company, but it was still a stable enough job to be called a permanent job for a lifetime. So, my sister-in-law liked it because she didn't have to worry about any layoffs in the future. However, due to my brother's employment as a civil servant, who knew that would affect my life substantially, one day, After we were married for 3 years, my husband took me to a fancy restaurant. It hadn't been long since our wedding anniversary passed, and it was not even my birthday. I wonder why he had made a reservation at such an expensive restaurant. Well, he announced this to me. I'll give it a try for just 1 year. Your brother also studied for a year, and he is a public servant now. Is there any reason why I couldn't become like him? Honestly, I have a better academic background than your brother. I had higher SAT scores too. So trust me and give me a chance for 1 year. I'm confident that you won't regret it. Well, that was because my brother had no place to go, so he had no choice but to study as if his life depended on it. But you are in a different position. Is it because you didn't get a promotion? If that's the case, there's another chance. So stop talking about the civil service exam. No, it's not that. You know Steven when we were dating and active in clubs together, right? He was the one who was a grade 9 civil servant at the local office. I met him on a street a while ago, and he said he was staying home on paternity leave to take care of his new baby. In my company, I can't even dream of having such a stable job like that. I can't even dream of taking any leave like that. But since he's a civil servant, his benefits are completely different from my company. When I saw that the man who I thought would keep his boring job at the local office, his whole life was living better than me, I couldn't focus at work. Isn't this why your brother quit his good job and took the civil service exam? So I want to give it a try too. Please, my husband said with a confident face. In fact, I couldn't tell my husband that my brother had been laid off. Since it was my family's business, I didn't want to bring any shame to our family and be ridiculed later. I was too proud. That day, I told my husband no, but he didn't back down easily. Even my mother-in-law put pressure on me. Why are you being like this? Before your husband gets older, he says he wants to take the civil service exam. What is your reason for opposing it? Don't you think my son is better than your brother in terms of his academic background? Judging by his skills, he's much better than your own brother. So why couldn't my son do what your brother did? He didn't say he was going to do it for 10 years. It will only be for a year, so please let him do it. Mother, we can't afford to do that right now. How much is the bank interest that I have to repay every month? We can't afford it on my salary alone, and his company isn't telling him to quit. So why bother? I don't understand why he wants to take the civil service exam. The company he works for now is also very good. You know it too. But why does he want to go through all this trouble? In the end, it was about money, right? Do you see your husband as a money-making machine? Okay, I'll give you the money. Then I know that my son's wish will be fulfilled. Let him do it. After all, on the condition that my mother-in-law will give us $1,500 a month, my husband was able to prepare for the civil service exam. To be honest, it was impossible with that amount of money. My husband spent a lot of money on his private program fees, dormitory fees, food expenses, pocket money, etc. However, my husband was so confident in front of me because his mother was paying for it. To make up for the shortfall in our living expenses because of him, I once again took on a part-time job on weekends. So I ended up taking care of my husband who was taking the civil service exam. Still, I thought I just had to hold on for a year. It wasn't something I couldn't do. My sister-in-law, who heard about my situation, came to me with an envelope of money to repay me for helping her with living expenses. I refused several times, but she was insistent. It's nothing compared to what you did for us, so please don't refuse it and accept it, because that way my mind will be at ease too. Thanks to you, who helped me at that time, my husband also passed the civil service exam. This time I want to be of help to you. Because I knew how my sister-in-law felt, I accepted the envelope with the money without refusing it any longer. A year passed since my husband was studying for the exam, but he didn't pass. Maybe it was a natural result. Even if he studied to death, it wouldn't have been enough. But he secretly even went on a trip to Southeast Asia to go scuba diving with his old club members. He even boasted that he would definitely pass. If it didn't work out, he could just get a new job. Unlike my brother who had no place to go anymore, my husband believed that he would always have a place to go. He tried for 2 more years after that, but the results did not change. Then my brother, who couldn't just watch my husband struggle, called him and talked to him. He told him that studying like that wouldn't work and advised him to quit and get a job. My husband was probably offended by those words. He ran straight back to his mother and told her like a tattletale. My mother-in-law called me angrily and asked why my brother was telling her son, who was preparing for the grade 12 civil servant exam, what to do when he was barely a lowly grade 7 civil servant. She couldn't believe that he would tell her son to quit when my brother only graduated from a reputable university. When I think about it, this is all your fault. How did you treat my son so insignificantly that your brother would dare to say that? It's not like he's paying for it, and I'm paying for it every month. So what's the problem? If he presumptuously calls my son and starts talking nonsense one more time, then I won't be silent either. Go and tell your brother that. What was so important about her son preparing to become a grade 12 civil servant? My mother-in-law screamed at me. My husband, hiding behind his mother, used the civil service exam as an excuse to avoid getting a job. He studied like that for 7 years, and now he was at an age where it would be difficult to find a company that would hire him. It wasn't just an age issue, it was because he had no work experience for 7 years, making a career break a major issue. Because of the situation, planning for a child was out of the question. I had to take care of my husband, and it took a toll on me, physically and mentally. In the end, I ended up in the hospital due to overwork. My mother, who couldn't just watch the situation, came forward. She called my husband to a restaurant and asked him to work part-time on weekends. She couldn't believe that he was still not working after all these years. Your wife sacrificed for 7 years by working at the office on weekdays and working part-time on weekends. Is that all? Even if she had 10 bodies, it wouldn't be enough to take care of you. I'm not saying you should quit the civil service exam because it would be impossible for you to get a job now. Instead, you can come to my restaurant, even if it's just for the weekend, to work with me. Please lighten the burden on my daughter's shoulders. So my husband went to my mom's restaurant to work a part-time job on the weekends. Maybe it was because my husband didn't have the nerve to see his mother-in-law, so he worked part-time without saying anything. My mother treated him just like a full-time employee and gave him his pay. In fact, my mother didn't ask my husband to work part-time, but she had planned to hand over the restaurant to him later. So, she wanted to let him practice beforehand. Of course, until then, my husband didn't know my mother's inner thoughts. One day I went with my husband to my in-laws for the holiday. My sister-in-law and her husband, who got married a few years ago, came with their daughter. My sister-in-law noticed that I couldn't take my eyes off her daughter. Cindy, if you're jealous, you should also have one. Even though my brother is doing well, it would be difficult if you cut off our family name for our household. Don't you think about your duty as a daughter-in-law? What my daughter is saying is correct. Even if you have a child right away, you're already old. How long are you gonna let it pass by? As a daughter-in-law, just because you're working more on behalf of your husband, are you going to abandon your duty? I will take care of your baby, so even now have a baby first. Then my husband said in his pouting voice, "Are you planning to kill your son? I study on weekdays and work at my mother-in-law's restaurant on weekends. Have a child even when I'm so busy. Please leave me alone." What do you mean by working at your mother-in-law's restaurant? Tell me properly. Due to my mother-in-law's nagging, my husband finally told her that he started working part-time on weekends at my mom's restaurant. And before the words were even finished, my mother-in-law screamed, "How dare this woman exploit my son? Hey, if you have a mouth, speak up. Did you tell your mother to take my son and put him to work like a slave? Since he couldn't earn money, you told him to make it up with his labor, using his body, right? You're a very scary person. If you needed money, you could have just come to me and told me. Why take my son who's studying and make him work? Because of you, my son can't concentrate and fails his tests." That day, my mother-in-law called my mother and demanded an apology, saying that it was all my and my mother's fault that her son failed the exam. Eventually, my mom apologized and the case was settled. But that wasn't the end. A few days later, I received a call from my mom. Due to selling alcohol to a minor, she was suspended from doing business. According to her employee, when she took the order at the table, they appeared to be in their 30s. She stated there were only 3 men. But when she arrived with the food and beer they had ordered, there was a young kid sitting at the table as well. Unfortunately, there was a crackdown at that time, so when officers checked his ID and discovered he was a minor, it became a problem. My mother felt wronged, but she comforted her employees and gave them paid time off. After hearing her story, my older brother asked her to get a physical examination, but she refused, saying she knew her body better. I was worried about her working too hard at the restaurant, so my brother and I persuaded her to finally agree to take a physical exam. After our father passed away, she opened a restaurant and used the money she earned to send my brother and me to college. Thanks to her excellent cooking skills, the restaurant had a constant stream of customers, and it eventually expanded to its current size. The restaurant had a kitchen and a hall staff, and it prospered to the point where there were over 20 employees. However, the more successful it became, the more my mother had to struggle with all her strength. She was about to hand over the restaurant to my husband for this reason. My older brother, who was a civil servant, had no intention of taking over the restaurant, and neither did my sister-in-law, who was an elementary school teacher. Since my husband had not yet settled in, my mother wanted to leave the restaurant to him so he could make a living with his pride intact. However, my mother-in-law caused a scene, and my husband lost his chance. On her first day in the hospital, my mother fasted and began having her blood tested the next day. She underwent various tests throughout the day. My mother even joked that she would die from exhaustion from the exams. However, the test results showed that something was wrong with her. The whole family was shocked when my mother was diagnosed with cancer. Fortunately, she did not need surgery, as the disease was caught early, and we were told she could make a full recovery with medication. My mother said it was thanks to us that it was discovered early and she was able to live because of us, and said she was grateful. Even when our dad died in an accident, our mom did the same. Rather than mourning our father's death, she said she could survive with strength because she had my brother and me in a tough time. It wasn't us, but it was thanks to my positive mother's personality. After being discharged from the hospital, our mother decided to take a break from working at the restaurant, but she couldn't keep leaving her restaurant closed. Leave your restaurant to my husband? Will my mother-in-law let him do that? She wreaked havoc like that last time. I'll have a good talk with your mother-in-law. Maybe your husband also missed the time to quit? He might be stuck on a test that doesn't even make sense to keep trying. In cases like this, one solution is to give him a reason to quit. You can't let him live like that for the rest of his life. My mom seemed to have a point. I went with my mom to my mother-in-law's hair salon on the weekend, but there I met an unexpected person. Among several beauty high school students out for practical training, one of them was the minor who came to my mom's restaurant. My mother was even investigated by the police for the matter. My mom remembered her face clearly. Why are you here? So were you an employee here? The student who was confronted by my mom became so shocked and she immediately ran away. And my mother-in-law, who saw the situation, was so flustered that her eyeballs were shaking, and then she screamed like a thunderbolt. Why are you making a fuss at someone else's workplace? What about my employee? What did she do wrong? Stop making wrongful assumptions and get out of here. That sight was strange to anyone who saw it. I beg your pardon, but did you just say it was wrongful assumption? What am I speculating about? Are you saying that I think you intentionally ordered that student to suspend business at our restaurant? Looking at your behavior, it seems to be correct. Great. What can we do now that it's already in the past? It would have been nothing if you two just claimed it wasn't her. But let me ask you one question. Why did you do that? Do you have any resentment toward me? Are you asking because you don't know? When I raised my son with everything I've got, you made him work at your restaurant. So I was mad. I was going to have your restaurant close up. Why? Did I do anything wrong? Seeing my mother-in-law appearing so shameless, I almost cursed at her. Mother, how could you say that? In the first place, if Samuel hadn't used the civil service exam as an excuse to goof off, Would my mom have called him to a restaurant and made him work? It's been almost 7 years. During that long time, I worked hard to support your son. Oh my, are you so strange now? I send $1,500 per month to my son's bank account every month. How dare you lie like that? Should I call my son and ask? Yes, please do that. Except for the first year, I haven't received a single penny to this date. Now. So, my mother-in-law called my husband and asked where her money was, and my husband confessed that he used the money somewhere else. In the meantime, he used her money to go scuba diving abroad and meet his friends for entertainment. Only then did my mother-in-law's face turn red. Even her hands were shaking. Oh my God, I was wondering why he was so out of his mind, and the reason was this. It was you who spoiled him so much. It's no wonder that he couldn't be responsible. He will be 40 soon, and he's not thinking about taking care of his family. He made all kinds of excuses and wasted his time using his mother's money. Still, because he sleeps under the same blanket with my daughter, I came to tell him that I would give him my restaurant. I'm the crazy one. Now I see that it is not my business to give your son my restaurant, but rather I should get the money back from your son for taking advantage of my daughter all these years. I can't leave my daughter in the hands of a leech like your son anymore. I will file for divorce, so be prepared for alimony. Oh, I'm saying this because of the affection I once had as your in-law. If you want to make your son a decent human being, don't cover up his mistakes, even if you have to discipline him before it's too late. Fix his corrupt mindset first. What? Why are you talking so recklessly about my son? What's wrong with my son? He's a good son who has never given me any problems in my life. He met the wrong girl and ended up like this. It makes me so angry what happened. So where do you get off giving any advice? You're the ones who should pay the alimony. Stop it. I was trying to end it quietly, but I can't help it when you come out like this. Since I can't communicate with people like you, Mother, I have no choice but to handle this according to the law. You know that scheming to shut down an innocent business like what you have done is illegal, right? The customers here were filming us fighting on video earlier, and there is evidence since you confessed to illegal activities and your son embezzled living expenses for 7 years. Since your son spent our money on entertainment, and it has been revealed that he has been neglectful of our family, a divorce judgment will also be in my favor, so I can get an apology through a lawsuit. Sometimes, an apology in the form of money is better than an apology in words. In the meantime, you need to be prepared because we will receive every single penny of your sincere devotion to your son. If you have anything more to say, do it in court. I don't want to hear any more trashy nonsense that comes out every time you open your mouth because my ears are precious. I took my mom from my mother-in-law's shop, and then we headed to my house. Anyway, I was the one who paid the mortgage bank loan in the meantime, so it was my house. Right? So I packed my husband's things in luggage and sent them to his mother's house. I plan to have the title to the house, which is in joint names, transferred to my name as the lawsuit progresses. My husband begged me for one more chance, but I had already lost enough trust for him. I didn't even want to look at him because I despised him. So I changed the front door password and sent him away when he came. We are currently going through divorce proceedings, but I am not worried because the outcome is obvious to anyone. The only question is how much alimony I will receive, as that is all that is left between us. My mother's restaurant was decided to be handed over to her oldest employee, who had worked with my mom the longest. However, her employee had no intention of taking over my mom's restaurant, so my mom asked her to just manage the restaurant until I get my affairs in order. When I get my mind together, I will take over my mom's restaurant. That is how I am trying to live my second life, without relying on anyone and with my own strength. Thank you for listening to my story so far. I hope your day is bright and happy too. Thank you for your support and wisdom in the comment section of this story. Please give me advice. Likes and subscriptions are of great help to me. Have a good day today.